A black billionaire woman arrives at a Michelin-starred restaurant, expecting a flawless dining experience. However, just minutes after her arrival, she is bluntly refused by the receptionist and restaurant manager. Little did they know, this decision would lead to one of the biggest reckonings in their careers when Tessa returns. Not as a customer. How will this unexpected encounter change their lives? Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from around the world. And if you love stories about change and justice, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspirational content. Tessa Williams, a black billionaire, stepped out of the sleek black limo parked outside Maison Elegance, one of New York's most prestigious fine dining restaurants, renowned for its Michelin star and regarded as a symbol of luxury and refinement. Tessa's black hair was neatly tied up, and she was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. Her face exuded confidence and power, a mark of her years of success in the real estate world. With a net worth in the billions, Tessa was not just a successful businesswoman. She was a symbol of resilience and relentless effort to rise above. Tessa had spent her life overcoming challenges and prejudice, from the early days of starting her small real estate company to becoming one of America's most successful self-made billionaires. Today, after weeks of nonstop work, she wanted to take some time to enjoy a meal at one of the world's most renowned restaurants. Accompanying her was Claire, her close assistant and friend who had been by her side since the very beginning of her career. Claire, a young, quick-witted woman who always ensured that every detail in Tessa's work was executed flawlessly, had made the dinner reservation a month in advance. It was a special evening, not for work, but for Tessa to sit back and enjoy the fruits of her years of hard work. Maison Elegance exuded a rare kind of opulence, with crystal chandeliers reflecting off the expensive oak walls. From the outside, large glass windows revealed the lavish interior, where sophisticated diners enjoyed top-tier dishes prepared by world-renowned chefs. Though Tessa had dined at many high-end restaurants, this was her first time at Maison Elegance, a place she had always heard of for its extravagance and reputation. But as she stepped out of the car, a familiar sense of anxiety crept into her heart. Despite her tremendous success, she couldn't shake the feeling that, to many, she wasn't a talented billionaire. She was simply a black woman. Tessa was acutely aware of the curious glances and judgmental looks she often faced in such exclusive spaces, places that were largely unaccustomed to the presence of a woman of color. "Are you ready?" Claire asked, stepping beside her with her usual confidence. Tessa smiled softly, pushing aside the unease within her. "Ready? Let's enjoy this evening." The two women entered the restaurant, and immediately the atmosphere inside seemed to pause for a moment. Eyes from the surrounding diners turned toward them, as if Tessa's presence disrupted the peace and familiarity of the place. But Tessa was used to this. She walked with confidence, her high heels softly clicking against the marble floor, while Claire followed, radiating her own quiet confidence. However, as they approached the reception desk, where a young woman stood with polite yet cold professionalism, Tessa sensed something was off. The receptionist, with sharp features and a sleek black uniform, quickly scanned them, her smile polite but tinged with hesitation. "Good evening. How can I help you?" the receptionist asked, though her eyes did not seem fully at ease. Claire stepped forward, her voice full of confidence. "We have a reservation. The name is Tessa Williams." But instead of bowing and leading them to their table, the receptionist hesitated, glancing at the computer screen in front of her. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, and within seconds, her expression changed, her eyes becoming uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but I don't see any reservation under that name," she said, her voice slightly low and cold. Tessa remained still, her expression unchanged, but inside she felt a familiar feeling. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such a situation, a vague refusal, a flimsy excuse. Even as a billionaire, she still had to face prejudice and subtle discrimination in these luxurious spaces. Claire frowned, incredulous at what she was hearing. "There must be some mistake. I made the reservation a month ago. Could you please check again?" But the receptionist merely shook her head, her face full of awkwardness and avoidance. "I'm terribly sorry, but the restaurant is fully booked tonight." Tessa took a deep breath and smiled lightly. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to make a scene. She knew exactly where she stood and who truly held the power. "Thank you," she said calmly. I'll make other arrangements." With that, Tessa and Claire left the restaurant, not looking back. Part 2. The Refusal and Initial Reaction. After leaving Maison Elegance, Tessa and Claire walked down the bustling streets of New York, the lights from towering buildings above reflecting on the wet sidewalks, casting vibrant streaks of light. Claire took a deep breath, trying to control the anger bubbling up inside her. She still couldn't believe how rudely and discriminatingly they had treated Tessa, one of the most powerful women in the world. "This is unacceptable," Claire burst out, her voice brimming with outrage. "How could they treat you like this? Do they think they can do this because you're a black woman? I just can't understand. We have to do something right away." Tessa continued walking slowly, her face not revealing any clear emotion, but her eyes were sharp and thoughtful. She had faced moments like this many times before. No matter how successful and wealthy she became, no matter how much she belonged to the elite of society, there were still places where she would always be looked down upon because of her skin color. This wasn't the first time Tessa had faced racial discrimination, and she was certain it wouldn't be the last, but it no longer angered her the way it used to. "Claire, calm down," Tessa replied gently, her eyes still focused ahead. "They want us to get angry. They want us to create a scene so they can turn us into a part of their negative narrative. But we won't give them that." Claire turned back, her eyes flaring with confusion. "Can you really let this go, Tessa? This is clear racism. You made the reservation a month ago, and they had no reason to refuse you other than your skin color. We can't just walk away from this." Tessa stopped and turned to face Claire, her eyes bright with fierce determination. "I didn't say I would let it go," Tessa said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been fighting this all my life. I know exactly what's happening, and I know how to handle it. But Claire, I'm no longer the young, impulsive girl I used to be. I don't need to react the way they want me to react. We won't make a big scene. We won't scream or run to the media to make this loud." Claire, surprised, knew that Tessa wasn't one to easily let things go, especially when treated unfairly. "So, what are you going to do?" Claire asked, her voice still filled with anger, but now tinged with curiosity. Tessa smiled, a light smile full of hidden meaning. Her eyes grew distant and deep, as if she had a plan already formed in her mind. "I'm not going to demand they give me a table," she said, her voice certain and strong. "I'm going to come back as the owner. I'm going to buy Maison Elegance." Tessa's words hit Claire like a sudden storm, leaving her unable to believe what she had just heard. She stood still, too shocked to speak. You're going to buy that Michelin-starred restaurant?" Claire asked, her voice weak, as if unsure she had heard correctly. Tessa nodded, her eyes still fixed on the bustling street ahead. "That's right. If they don't want me as a customer, I'll become the owner of this place, and I'll change everything. Maison Elegance won't be a place just for arrogant elites anymore. It will become a place that welcomes everyone, no matter who they are." Claire looked at Tessa with admiration. She knew Tessa was a strong and determined woman. But this idea, it was bold and grand. "You always have big plans, don't you?" Claire smiled proudly, though the anger in her heart hadn't entirely subsided. Tessa chuckled lightly, the chuckle of someone who was used to conquering challenges that seemed impossible. "I never do anything halfway, Claire. If I do something, I go all the way. And this time, my plan isn't just about getting a seat at the table. It's about changing an entire system." Claire shook her head with admiration. "You're really going to make this happen?" "Yes," Tessa responded immediately, without hesitation. "I won't let people like them continue to control who gets to enter these spaces. We'll take back that power, and I'll do it my way." The two continued walking, leaving behind Maison Elegance, the place that had just refused them, but was unaware that its fate was about to be completely changed by Tessa. As they got far enough from the restaurant, Tessa stopped in front of a small cafe on the side of the street. She looked at Claire and softly said, "Let's sit down for a moment. We have something to discuss." Claire followed Tessa into the cafe, the excitement and curiosity now replacing the anger in her heart. They chose a table by the window, where the street lights created a peaceful atmosphere amidst the hurried cars outside. When the waiter brought 2 cups of coffee, Tessa began to think deeply about her plan. "Are you really going to buy that restaurant?" Claire asked, still in disbelief at Tessa's declaration. But that's Maison Elegance, a Michelin-starred restaurant, part of one of the most prestigious chains in the world. How can we buy it so easily? Tessa took a sip of her coffee, set the cup down on the table, and slowly looked into Claire's eyes. Maison Elegance might be a Michelin-starred restaurant, she said calmly, but that doesn't mean it's not facing financial difficulties. Reputation doesn't always equal profitability. She continued to explain, I've been following Maison Elegance for a while, not because of its food or service, but because of its financial metrics. While it still maintains a glamorous facade, inside, they're struggling. Debt is piling up, and revenue is not as expected. This is our opportunity. Claire leaned back, pondering Tessa's words. She knew that Tessa was a master at seizing opportunities, especially when it came to mergers and acquisitions. But this was an internationally renowned restaurant, and taking it over wouldn't be easy. So, what's your next step? Claire asked, her eyes still curious. How can we convince them to sell, especially when they don't know who you are? If they find out, will they even be willing to sell to the person they just refused service to? Tessa smiled, her face brimming with confidence. They won't know who I am. We'll approach them through my partners and investments. This isn't the first time I've bought a business without revealing my identity. We'll start by researching the current shareholders and owners. I have a team of lawyers and financial advisors ready to step in whenever necessary. Claire nodded, feeling that Tessa's plan was becoming clearer. But what if they refuse to sell? This restaurant is their pride, and Michelin doesn't let just anyone take ownership. Tessa looked out the window, her sharp eyes seeming to look far beyond the tall buildings of New York. If they don't sell now, we'll wait for the right moment. Their financial situation is shaky, and with a few more losing quarters, they'll have no choice but to sell. But I don't plan on waiting that long. I'll make them an offer they can't refuse, a sum so large that they'll see selling to me as their best option. Claire smiled, her eyes now filled with admiration. You always have a way of making things work out in your favor. Tessa smiled back. I didn't come this far just to stop at a denied meal, Claire. This isn't just about me. It's about all the people who have been excluded, judged by their appearance. And we're going to change that, starting with Maison Elegance. With the decision made, Tessa and Claire continued their journey, leaving behind the restaurant that had refused them, unaware that a storm was brewing. Soon after arriving back at her office, Tessa quickly got to work. She called together her team of financial and legal advisors, people she trusted implicitly, to begin the process of acquiring Maison Elegance. The first step was to request a detailed financial report on the restaurant. While the reputation of Maison Elegance led many to believe they were thriving, Tessa wasn't easily fooled by appearances. She had worked in real estate and finance long enough to know that what looked perfect often hid cracks. And, just as she suspected, when the financial report arrived a few days later, the numbers revealed that the restaurant was facing far more significant financial difficulties than its glamorous exterior let on. Their revenue has taken a sharp decline over the past year, one of her financial advisors explained, as they presented the details of Maison Elegance's financial status. Although the restaurant attracts crowds on special occasions, the operating costs are too high. Maintaining Michelin standards requires substantial investment in ingredients and services, but they're not able to offset it through revenue. On top of that, they've incurred significant debt from a recent renovation. Tessa listened intently, her sharp eyes analyzing the information before her. She realized that the restaurant was no longer the prosperous establishment it once was, and this was the perfect time for her to make a move and present an offer they couldn't refuse. What about the shareholders? Tessa asked, her eyes not leaving the charts on the screen. Who's really in control? A legal advisor flipped through some documents and answered, the restaurant is owned by a group of private investors, most of whom are silent shareholders. However, the bulk of decision-making power lies with a few key individuals, including the current executive director and a major investor from Europe. Tessa smiled faintly. We'll approach them, but it must be done discreetly. I don't want them to know that I'm the one behind this deal. At least not right now. We need to use intermediaries to probe their interest in selling and make an attractive offer. Tessa's team immediately sprang into action. They used their connections in the financial industry to approach the investors of Maison Elegance without revealing Tessa's identity. Phone calls were made, secret meetings were held in offices across New York, and step by step, Tessa's offer was gradually presented to the people holding control of the restaurant. Meanwhile, Tessa kept a close eye on every move. She knew that, although Maison Elegance's financial situation was poor, its reputation meant that they wouldn't easily decide to sell. As a result, she had prepared a meticulous strategy of persuasion, offering a large enough investment to make the investors feel that this was the right time to withdraw. One evening, while working late in her office, Claire came in with a cup of hot coffee. "Any new developments?" she asked, setting the coffee down on Tessa's desk. Tessa looked up, her eyes full of confidence. "Everything is going according to plan. We've started to see some positive signs from a few of the investors. They're beginning to waver. Just one more push, and we'll have this deal wrapped up." Claire sat down across from her, beaming with excitement. "So we're really going to get Maison Elegance? You've actually done it." Tessa smiled back, but her eyes were filled with determination. "It's not just that we're about to do it, Claire. This is just the beginning. Once I have it in my hands, we're not just going to change how they treat customers like me. We're going to change how they view power and diversity in the luxury industry." With determination and a carefully crafted plan in mind, Tessa knew she wouldn't let this injustice go easily. She would return to Maison Elegance not as a rejected guest, but as the one running the entire operation. When the key investors began to waver, Tessa took another step forward in the negotiation process. She instructed her financial advisors to prepare a formal proposal, an offer that Maison Elegance's investors could hardly refuse. Tessa chose to approach through intermediaries, using her trusted business and financial connections to reach out to the investors. Discreet letters and secret phone calls were made, her partners ensuring that every transaction was handled cautiously without revealing any clue of who was behind the deal. Tessa wasn't in a rush. She knew that for everything to go according to plan, every move had to be carefully calculated, and timing was the most crucial factor. One autumn afternoon, as Tessa sat in her office, soft sunlight streaming through the glass windows, she received a phone call from Daniel. His voice was filled with excitement but remained professional. "Tessa, the investors have agreed to negotiate," Daniel announced. "They want to meet with us next week. They're not entirely ready to sell yet, but given the current financial situation, they're very interested in our offer." Tessa set her pen down on the desk, feeling a small rush of excitement, but she didn't let herself get carried away. "Very well," she replied calmly. "We need to prepare thoroughly for the meeting. I don't want just a good offer. I want an offer they can't refuse." "We'll prepare all the necessary documents," Daniel responded. "We'll present the most attractive investment package possible. And don't worry, your identity will remain confidential throughout the negotiation process." Tessa hung up the phone and gazed out the window, her mind racing with ideas and strategies. This wasn't just about acquiring a luxury restaurant. It was an opportunity to completely change the way people thought about power in the hospitality industry. Maison Elegance would no longer be a destination reserved only for the right kind of powerful, but would become a new symbol, a place where everyone, regardless of skin color or status, could enjoy luxury. The day of the formal meeting arrived quickly. Tessa, along with her team of advisors, stepped into a conference room at a luxurious building in the heart of New York. The investors of Maison Elegance were already there, seated in a long row around a polished mahogany table. Though well prepared, the atmosphere in the room was tense. They knew they were facing a significant decision, selling off a part of their prized asset. The meeting began with the usual formalities, brief exchanges about the restaurant's financial state. One of the lead investors, Mr. Vincent Laurent, who held the largest share, was the first to speak. He was a French businessman well known in the high-end culinary world. "Your offer is very appealing," Vincent said, looking directly at Daniel, who represented Tessa during the meeting. "But I'm still curious. Why Maison Elegance? This restaurant, while struggling, holds immense value for us. We've received numerous offers before, but no one has ever proposed such a large figure." Daniel smiled, responding with a professional tone. "Maison Elegance is a symbol. However, as you know, the high-end restaurant industry is evolving. We believe that with our vision, we can not only restore, but elevate the restaurant further. This is not just about profit, it's about the future." Vincent leaned forward, his face showing signs of skepticism. But we still don't know exactly who's really behind this deal. It seems that whoever made this offer knows very well about the culinary industry and about Maison Elegance, but they're keeping their identity hidden. We want to know who we're doing business with. The room fell silent. Daniel knew this was the moment to protect Tessa's anonymity. He maintained his calm tone and said, "At the moment, our client wishes to remain anonymous until the basic terms are agreed upon. However, I can assure you that this is a credible investor with a long-term vision for the restaurant." Vincent raised his eyebrows but didn't press further. He knew that, given the current situation, without a significant change, Maison Elegance might continue to sink deeper into financial trouble. Hesitation gradually gave way to practicality. The negotiations went on for hours with proposals and objections, numbers being thrown around and adjusted. But in the end, Tessa's offer was too attractive to turn down. The investors, after much debate and consideration, agreed to the preliminary terms. The meeting concluded with a firm handshake between Daniel and Vincent. Tessa, watching from afar through the glass, felt a wave of excitement wash over her. She knew she was now one step closer to owning Maison Elegance. "We're almost there," Daniel said to Tessa immediately afterward. "We just need to finalize the paperwork. Are you ready for the next step?" Tessa smiled, her eyes sharp and determined. "I've been ready for a long time. Once we finalize this, Maison Elegance will no longer be a place for those they choose. It will become a new symbol. A place where everyone, regardless of their background or skin color, is welcome." She knew the journey was still long, but the turning point had arrived. The restaurant that once rejected her would soon be in her hands, and Tessa would be the one to change it all. As the final paperwork was completed, the days that followed were filled with tense but hopeful events. Tessa and her team didn't miss a single detail, from reviewing the contract terms to adjusting the transfer value to ensure that everything went smoothly. Daniel and the financial advisors kept close tabs on the involved parties, ensuring that everything proceeded as planned. Secret meetings and final negotiations gradually came to a close. Vincent Laurent and the other investors, after several rounds of discussions, finally agreed to Tessa's final proposal. They still didn't know that the person orchestrating the entire deal was the very woman they had once refused to serve, a fact Tessa skillfully kept hidden. Tessa sat in her office one early morning, sunlight streaming through the large glass window. On her desk lay the official contract transferring ownership of Maison Elegance, ready to be signed. This moment, the moment she had been waiting for, had finally come. As Daniel walked into the office, he flashed a confident smile. "Everything is ready. The investors have agreed to sign. We just need to complete our part." Tessa looked at him, a bright light shining in her eyes. "Good. Let's make this official." A few hours later, Tessa and her team arrived at the offices of the law firm representing the investors. The conference room was modern and sleek, with a large wooden table where the investors were already seated, their faces serious and tense. Vincent, the lead representative for the group of investors, maintained his calm demeanor but couldn't hide his curiosity. The signing ceremony began with formality. Thick contracts were placed on the table, and every clause was reviewed one final time. Lawyers from both sides exchanged detailed discussions to ensure that everything was in order. The atmosphere in the room was filled with tension and seriousness, as everyone understood that this was not just an ordinary financial transaction, but the transfer of part of the restaurant's cultural legacy and reputation. When it came time for Tessa to sign, she stepped forward, her steps slow but confident. As she took the pen and placed it on the paper, signing her name on the contract, she felt a surge of power welling up inside her. She wasn't just acquiring Maison Elegance. She was putting an end to the prejudice and discrimination that had been associated with it for years. Once all the signatures were completed, Vincent Laurent stood up and extended his hand to Daniel. "A good deal," he said, "but I still can't understand why someone would be willing to pay such a high price for a struggling restaurant." Daniel simply smiled lightly and replied politely, "Sometimes the value lies not in the present, but in the potential future." As the investors left, Tessa stood up and walked out of the office, a light smile on her lips. She knew they still didn't know the truth about her, but that no longer mattered. Maison Elegance was now hers, and she would do everything to change it. When Tessa returned to her office, Claire was waiting for her, her face full of anticipation. "How did it go?" Claire asked, unable to contain her excitement. Tessa smiled, lifting up the signed contract in her hand and said, "We did it. Maison Elegance is now ours." Claire threw her arms around Tessa in a joyful hug. "You're amazing. We've made the dream a reality." Tessa gently pulled away from the embrace, her eyes full of determination. "We still have a lot of work to do. This is just the beginning." She sat down in her large leather chair in the office, her eyes shining with the plans to come. "Now it's time to change everything, Claire. Maison Elegance will no longer be a place for the elite and those who discriminate. It will become a place that welcomes everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from." "Where do you plan to start?" Claire asked, sitting down next to Tessa, her eyes filled with curiosity and eagerness. Tessa looked out the window, where the sunlight streamed across New York's tall buildings. "We'll start by changing the way they treat customers, then the entire management system. Those who've enforced discriminatory policies will either change or leave. We'll bring in a new culture, one of inclusion, fairness, and respect. This will no longer just be a high-end restaurant, but a symbol of change." Claire nodded, feeling the fierce determination in Tessa's words. "So, what's the next step?" Tessa turned back, her eyes full of resolve. "I'm going to Maison Elegance. This time, I'm not coming to dine. I'm coming to change everything." With those words, Tessa knew that her new journey, the journey of remaking Maison Elegance, had officially begun. The next day, Tessa walked through the doors of the restaurant that had coldly and indiscriminately refused her just weeks before. This time, she wasn't coming as an ordinary customer. She walked in as the owner. As she passed through the large glass doors, a small bell chimed, catching the attention of the receptionist. It was none other than the same woman who had refused to serve Tessa during her previous visit. The receptionist's face paled as she realized that the woman standing before her was the one she had once looked down upon. But now, everything had changed. Tessa didn't wait for a greeting. She walked straight toward the reception desk, her gaze steady. "I'm not here to make a reservation," she said, her voice calm but full of authority. "I'm here as the new owner of this restaurant." The receptionist froze, her face draining of color, clearly not expecting this. The owner?" she stammered, her voice trembling. I didn't know." "It's all right," Tessa interrupted, her voice still gentle but firm. "There will be time for everyone to understand the situation. For now, I'd like to meet with the entire management team of the restaurant." Without waiting for the receptionist to respond, Tessa turned and walked further into the restaurant, where other staff members were busy preparing for the evening. The sound of her high heels clicked rhythmically on the wooden floor, as if announcing that a major change was about to take place. The lavish interior, the soft, warm glow of the lights, couldn't dispel the tension that Tessa brought with her. The staff, accustomed to the hustle and bustle of a pricey, Michelin-starred restaurant, all stopped and watched her steps with curious yet anxious eyes. A few minutes later, in a back meeting room of the restaurant, Tessa stood facing the management team of Maison Elegance, including Robert, the manager who had refused to serve her. Robert sat at the head of the table, his face unable to hide his surprise as he looked at Tessa. Clearly, he hadn't fully understood what was happening. Tessa began the meeting without a lengthy introduction. She placed both hands on the table, her cold gaze sweeping over each person in the room. "I'm Tessa Williams," she said clearly, "and as of today, I am officially the new owner of Maison Elegance." Silence blanketed the room. Faces of surprise, confusion, and worry filled the room. Robert, the manager, was clearly trying to find words to react, but remained speechless. Tessa's calm yet sharp gaze seemed to pin him too, his seat making him unable to muster the confidence he once had. "I know you may all be shocked by this change," Tessa continued, "but this is the reality. I've bought this restaurant, and starting today, there will be significant changes in the way Maison Elegance operates. I'm not here to change the quality of service or the food, but to change how you treat your customers." Tessa paused for a moment, letting her words sink into everyone in the room. "I am fully aware that there have been unspoken policies here, policies that exclude those you deem unfit for the luxurious image of this restaurant. I was one of those people. The tension in the room visibly rose. Robert looked down at the table, unable to meet Tessa's gaze. "That will no longer exist at Maison Elegance," Tessa said firmly. "I will not allow any form of discrimination, whether subtle or overt. From today, all customers, regardless of where they come from, will be treated with the same respect." The entire room remained silent. The management team exchanged brief glances, clearly grappling with the sudden changes. Robert, finally regaining some composure, cleared his throat. "Ms. Williams, I understand that you're the new owner, but this restaurant has a certain standard that we've maintained for many years. Expanding the customer base might affect the image of Maison Elegance." Tessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "And what exactly is the standard you're referring to? Excluding people who don't look like you? Or selecting customers based on appearance, skin color, or social class?" Robert opened his mouth, about to say something, but Tessa raised her hand to cut him off. "Let me be clear. If anyone here feels they can't implement the changes I'm asking for, you're free to leave. Maison Elegance will no longer be a place reserved for a selected group of customers. Starting today, we're going to change the entire way this restaurant operates, from customer service to management." A few people in the management team clearly felt uncomfortable, but they understood that the person in front of them was the new owner, the one holding all the power. Major changes were coming, and they had little choice but to adapt or leave. The meeting ended in tension, but Tessa knew that this was just the beginning. She was ready for the challenges ahead. Immediately after the meeting, Tessa got to work on overhauling the entire system at Maison Elegance. She didn't have time to waste, as she understood that changing the culture and mindset went beyond declarations. It required specific, clear, and decisive actions. First, she met with each department in the restaurant, from the receptionists and waitstaff to the chefs and senior management. Tessa didn't hesitate to explain her new vision for the restaurant, a place that didn't just serve world-class cuisine, but also stood as a symbol of fairness and inclusivity. She wanted to create an environment where everyone, from customers to staff, was respected and treated equally, regardless of their background, race, or social class. One of the first and most important changes Tessa implemented was eliminating the unspoken policies that the old management had maintained for years. These policies, though never publicly stated, had subtly or overtly excluded customers who didn't fit the elite image the restaurant wanted to project. Tessa made it clear that such standards had no place at Maison Elegance anymore. She emphasized that any form of discrimination would be dealt with severely. Tessa also hired diversity and inclusion experts to retrain the entire staff. The training sessions were designed not only to help employees better understand sensitive issues related to race, gender, and social status, but also to equip them with the skills needed to serve all customers with the same level of respect and professionalism. Tessa knew that to change the way the restaurant operated, she first had to change the mindset of those working there. At first, not everyone was entirely on board with Tessa's changes. Some longtime employees felt uncomfortable with the disruption of old traditions, while others worried that expanding the customer base would damage the restaurant's reputation. However, Tessa remained steadfast in her vision. She knew that any major change would face resistance, but she wouldn't let that stop her. One morning, after finishing a training session, Claire walked into Tessa's office, her face clearly worried. "It seems that some of the management still aren't accepting these changes," Claire said. "Robert and a few others have expressed their dissatisfaction. They think that changing the way the restaurant operates will lower its quality and luxury." Tessa sat quietly for a moment, gazing out the window. She knew that Robert, the former manager, and some of the other team members had clung to discriminatory and conservative mindsets, but she wasn't surprised. "If they can't adapt, then we have no choice but to let them go," Tessa said, her voice cold but certain. "Are you really going to fire them?" Claire asked, her face showing a hint of alarm. "Yes," Tessa answered without hesitation. "We can't continue to maintain a culture of exclusion. If Robert and people like him can't embrace my new vision, then I'll find others who will. People who understand and respect the value of inclusion." The internal changes quickly took place. Some senior management staff voluntarily left when they realized they no longer fit into Tessa's new vision. The vacant positions were filled with individuals who had progressive mindsets, people who believed in diversity and equality in the luxury hospitality industry. Along with this, Tessa also changed the customer service process. She ensured that from the receptionist to the waitstaff, everyone was thoroughly trained to provide the best experience for all customers. No more scrutinizing looks, no more discriminatory attitudes, only professionalism and absolute respect for everyone. Tessa also launched a new promotional campaign for Maison Elegance. Instead of emphasizing exclusivity and elitism as it had before, the new campaign focused on inclusivity and welcome. Maison Elegance, where everyone is welcome. The restaurant's new slogan resonated widely with the public. Not only were returning customers impressed, but those who had never dared to step foot in the restaurant before now felt excited and eager to experience it. This campaign caught the attention of the media. Articles began to appear, writing about the dramatic transformation of Maison Elegance under Tessa Williams's leadership. A restaurant that once only catered to the upper class was now opening its doors to everyone, from successful business people to young couples eager to experience the high-end dining they once thought was out of their reach. Tessa knew that she had come a long way, but the work wasn't over. She had succeeded in changing the structure and mindset of the restaurant, but there was still much to do to ensure that Maison Elegance wasn't just a Michelin-starred restaurant, but a symbol of justice and equality in the luxury service industry. The changes within the restaurant gradually settled, but Tessa knew that to create a lasting legacy, she had to continue expanding her vision. One afternoon, Tessa sat in her new office at the restaurant, the very office that had once been reserved for the old management. The soft glow of the sunset streamed through the glass, illuminating the elegant walls and minimalist decor, perfectly reflecting the luxurious yet approachable atmosphere she wanted to bring to Maison Elegance. She looked down at the crowd of customers below, not just the wealthy patrons, but also young couples, people from different walks of life, all enjoying an experience they had once thought wasn't meant for them. Claire walked in, her face beaming with satisfaction as she saw the restaurant running smoothly. "You won't believe it," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "The latest reviews for Maison Elegance are incredibly impressive. Customers aren't just praising the food, they're also raving about the welcoming atmosphere and the change you've brought." Tessa smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. But she knew that this wasn't the end. "I want more than that, Claire," she said. "We've changed one restaurant, but I want to make a bigger impact. I want Maison Elegance to be an example for the entire luxury service industry. Other restaurants will have to rethink how they treat their customers, their staff, and their communities." Claire nodded, fully understanding Tessa's intent. "How do you plan to do that?" "We'll start by expanding our network. I don't want to stop here. I want to find other restaurants, hotels, and high-end businesses where discrimination still exists, and we'll change them. I'll partner with renowned chefs, top restaurant managers, and leaders in the hospitality industry to create a new model, one where inclusion and luxury can go hand in hand." In the months that followed, Tessa began rolling out her larger plan. She organized workshops and conferences, inviting experts from the hospitality industry around the world to discuss how to change business culture, how to expand inclusion while maintaining high-quality service. Articles about the success of Maison Elegance flooded prestigious magazines, and many other restaurants began paying attention to the new vision Tessa was creating. Tessa also established partnerships with educational and community organizations, bringing training opportunities to young people who had been excluded from the luxury service industry because of their economic background or race. She believed that a legacy wasn't just built on what she created today, but also on the opportunities she left for the next generation. One evening, as Tessa sat sipping tea by the window of her office, Claire handed her a freshly printed newspaper. On the front page was a picture of Maison Elegance, with the bold headline, "Tessa Williams, the woman changing the face of the luxury hospitality industry." The article praised her success, not just in turning a restaurant into a financial success, but in creating a new model of inclusivity and fairness in the industry. Tessa set the newspaper down, gazing out at the twinkling lights of New York City at night. She knew she had achieved far more than she had imagined when she first walked through the doors of Maison Elegance. From a restaurant that rejected her because of her skin color, She had turned it into a symbol of change and progress. Claire sat down next to her, looking at Tessa with admiration. "You did it, Tessa. Not just a restaurant, but a legacy." Tessa smiled softly, her eyes glowing with belief. "Yes, but this is just the beginning. We'll go even further." With those words, Tessa felt that her journey was no longer about revenge or proving herself, but about changing an entire system. She had created a legacy, not by tearing things down, but by rebuilding them, by giving opportunity and opening doors for those who had been excluded. And to her, that was the greatest victory of all. Tessa's story wasn't just a journey of claiming justice for herself. It was a journey of turning a symbol of exclusion into a place that welcomed everyone, regardless of their background or skin color. It was a testament to the power of persistence, determination, and belief in the value of equality. Under Tessa's leadership, Maison Elegance became a beacon of inclusivity, where every customer was respected and where luxury was no longer confined by prejudice. Her story reminds us that, even in the face of injustice, we have the power to choose how we respond, not by lashing out in anger, but by transforming the world around us into a better place. Tessa chose to stand up and make a change, not just for herself, but for all those who had ever been denied an opportunity simply because they didn't fit society's ideal. If you found this story inspiring and thought-provoking about resilience and justice, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories like this. Together, we can learn and change the world for the better every day. Hit that subscribe button now.